I really appreciate your time. Today we're going to talk about 5G and how it's going to impact retail marketing. We're going to talk about 5 shifts in particular that are going to affect the industry. I just want to start with just a tiny little bit of background. So I come from Emodo, as you can see on the sign over there. Emodo is a subsidiary of Ericsson. For those that are not familiar with Ericsson, Ericsson is one of the 2 major global cellular infrastructure companies. So the other one being Huawei, which you've probably heard of if you read the news or you follow the news. Ericsson is the other major player. So essentially we provide the cell towers and all the infrastructure that goes into the mobile ecosystem. Emodo is the wing of Ericsson that focuses on leveraging carrier data that's running through our pipes to benefit the marketing industry and other industries. So we have an entire ad platform that is built on carrier intelligence, basically to create a higher level of data quality than is available in any other form. So today, I'm here to talk about 5G. And I'm assuming this is the clicker. So I'm going to start you off with a quick video. The reason I show this video is because it's the best depiction that I've found of the unique difference between 5G and 4G that's truly going to change the world. It's not about speed. You hear a lot about speed with 5G. 5G is fast, there's no question about it, but that's not really the magic of 5G. The magic of 5G has to do with latency. And this video is a depiction of what latency is all about. Let's see if it plays. It is. So what you're seeing is you're going to see VR headsets with cameras on the front of them. And you're seeing the delay from the time the camera gets back to the VR headset.
So today we're going to feel the difference between 4G and 5G. Do you see everything?
Yeah. These, by the way, are very famous soccer players on one of the most famous soccer teams in the world. So even just a split-second delay totally changes the soccer player's ability to do what they need to do. But with 5G, it's basically real time.
That's 5G. Okay. You're going to feel the difference between 4G and 5G. We'll start with 5G. So put this on. Good.
So with 5G, again, they can do normal activities. It's essentially real time.
Marco, now it's 4G.
But with 4G, they look like idiots. These are people who make 8 figures a year to play soccer, and they look like idiots because of the delay from 4G.
Yeah, of course. No.
So I'm going to skip the rest of it, but the point to take away from that is the split-second difference in the time that it takes for a signal to go to and from the cell tower makes all the difference in the world when it comes to immersive consumer experiences. And that's really the primary theme to remember about 5G. That is what 5G is going to do to the consumer world, and that will have massive implications on marketing. In particular, we want to talk about 5 shifts from 5G on marketing. Number 1, the carrier power shift. I'm not going to go into too much detail with these yet because I have to give you some background about 5G so that you can understand these 5. But I'm just going to mention them for now. The second is the shift from deterministic to AI. The third one is the shift in consumer tolerance. The fourth one is the shifting role of the retailer. And the last one is the shift in market pressure. Now, in order to explain what these 5 are, I have to give you a little background about 5G. There's 3 things that I'm going to tell you about. Number 1, data flows. How the data flows, what data is flowing, who it's flowing to. The second one is infrastructure. Both cellular infrastructure, a little bit about it, but also ad infrastructure, and how it's ready or not ready for 5G. And then lastly, devices, both cellular devices, but also consumer devices, and what those will look like in a 5G world. So let's get into the background. First of all, data flows. First thing to remember with data flows are there's going to be an explosion of IoT devices. 5G networks can handle 1 million devices per square kilometer It's just astronomically more than cellular has ever been able to handle before. There will be sensors everywhere, especially on things that move. You're going to see a proliferation of new IoT devices everywhere. Every single one of those devices is an input into an algorithm that makes algorithms better. The better the inputs, the better the output when it comes to AI. And all of these explosion of new devices are each going to mean better models, better AI. It also is really important to remember where the data is flowing from these IoT devices and other devices. If you look at the ecosystem today, this is the wireless ecosystem of 2019. What you're essentially looking at is you have the consumer, you have the consumer's phone, and you have every external device, whether they be IoT, like your Apple Watch, or a smart home device, like a Nest thermostat. All of them are connected to the app on the phone, either using Bluetooth or using Wi-Fi, using a Wi-Fi network that stays within the house. So everything is flowing to the app. That's why today we're so dependent on the SDK, because the SDK is a way to pull out data from the app, which is the best source of data today. But in the future, that's not going to be the case. More and more devices are going to skip Bluetooth, they're going to skip Wi-Fi, and they're going to go directly to 5G. Devices that we have today, but also new devices that we haven't even dreamed of yet. More and more stuff is going to be going to 5G. What does that mean? That means data that used to flow directly to the app is now flowing through the mobile carrier network. That means that more and better data is going to flow through the cellular network, through carriers. That means the carriers are going to have a much more profound role in the marketing ecosystem. And those who don't have access to the data that's flowing through carrier pipes are going to be left behind. So that's the data flow part. Let's go to infrastructure. This is a very simple depiction of the way the ad ecosystem is set up today. Basically, you have a consumer device, you have a cell tower, you have a central server. A central server is probably in an AWS server farm somewhere in Northern Virginia or somewhere else. There's a few central server farms. That's where websites sit, that's where ad infrastructure sits. And so you all know that when you pull up a website and you go on your phone and open an app, it takes like 3 seconds for stuff to load. That 3 seconds has become a crutch for this industry. And I just want to be very clear about one thing. 5G fixes this. It fixes the area between the phone and the cell tower. It does not fix anything else. So if you ever imagine that, hey, 5G will make advertising work much faster, incorrect. By itself, 5G will not do that at all. The only thing it will do, it will respond much faster between the cell tower and the device. But the whole ecosystem behind the cell tower doesn't change. In fact, it's going to get a lot worse because consumers are going to see the difference. So what's happened in the industry is we've filled in those 3 seconds with just stuff. We've made this really convoluted ad ecosystem. Somebody on the last panel was talking about, I want to pixel everything. They were really excited about pixeling. We have to get away from our addiction to pixels, people, because pixels slow things down, and 5G is not going to allow for that. So this is the way the ecosystem looks today. A single ad request ends up becoming a multiple bidding auction from header bidding. It gets pinged, it leads to ad tags getting pinged to verification companies, to attribution companies, multiple ad servers on both sides of the transaction. All of this happens behind the scenes before an ad is even served. So what does that mean? That means if we don't change anything, this is the future of advertising, 5G. It's a lot of empty spaces. What needs to happen for this to occur is for the entire ad infrastructure to change. And I'm not alone in saying this. The chief product officer of OpenX said recently, our whole infrastructure has to change because we are just not set up for the speed of 5G. When he says speed, he really means latency, but the point is still the same. So what does that mean? What does 5G infrastructure look like? So just first off, to remind you what our infrastructure looks like today, sort of a central server, feeding everything. That's where deterministic databases sit, on these central servers, right? And we ping them when we need to. And on these central AWS data farms in Northern Virginia. 5G infrastructure looks like this. It's really just very basic edge cloud computing. Who here has ever heard of edge cloud computing? Edge cloud computing is critical in the adoption of 5G, because 5G makes things really fast, but if we keep the cloud the way it is today, we won't leverage that speed. If we want to leverage that speed, we have to move those server farms much closer to the devices. So rather than a central server farm in Northern Virginia, we need to have tiny little server farms all over the place. So no matter where the consumer is on the 5G network, there's a server super close to that user to allow for the super low latency of 5G and for content and for ads to respond. So this is what edge cloud computing looks like. And there's another part to this too. This little blue thing right here is meant to be real-time AI decisioning. So when I said before, deterministic shifting to AI, it's going to be a big shift. Until this point, we've become addicted to deterministic data. We've been trained to ask vendors, how much deterministic data do you have? We just assume that deterministic data is correct and it's the best. And in many cases, that's true today. But in the future, it won't be. Because first of all, AI models will be way better because of what we talked about before, way more devices, way better data inputs. But also because AI allows for the speed, for the reaction time necessary, for the sort of immersive consumer experiences that will occur in 5G. So we just don't have time to ping a centralized database in Northern Virginia. Like, we've got to make real-time decisions. And the winners in the 5G world are those that will have access to the best data inputs, have the best AI models, and embed those models as close as possible to the consumers to be able to respond when they're doing stuff on their devices. So that's what the infrastructure looks like. So we've talked about data flows, we've talked about infrastructure. Let's talk about devices. So devices can mean a lot of things. This looks like a smoke alarm, right? It's not actually a smoke alarm. This is a product called the Ericsson Dot. And let me tell you something really important about 5G that's different about 4G. It has to do with the frequency that it runs on. 5G, to work its magic that you saw in that video, has to run on much higher frequencies than cellular has ever run on before. And high frequencies are fantastic in many ways. It goes way faster, that's where you get the latency. But there's downsides to high frequencies too, which is that it doesn't penetrate walls very well, and it doesn't go very long distances. What does that mean? That means that the 5G cellular infrastructure will look dramatically different. We won't be dependent on these fake trees at the side of highways. 5G is about tiny cells, and it's about cells not just outside in street lamps and traffic lights and all over the place. It's also going to have to be indoors. So for retailers, for example, who until this point have just waited and bided their time until the cellular companies built network close to their stores, all of a sudden retailers can't do that anymore. Retailers have to play an active role in building out 5G within their walls. If they don't, consumers will not be able to use their best devices with their best consumer experiences in their physical locations. They're going to have to play an active role. And this is what that looks like. This is an indoor antenna. Today this runs on 4G. This product soon will be a 5G product. And you'll see things like this all over the place. Malls, hotels, airports, retail stores, auto dealerships. They'll be all over. Any one of the physical locations is going to have to play in the 5G infrastructure industry. It's something really important to remember. Let's talk about consumer devices. Because of edge cloud, it's going to allow consumer devices to be far thinner and smaller and lighter, and batteries to last forever, and cheaper. Because the computing power on devices, think of a big, ugly, heavy, low-quality VR headset today. 5G is going to allow those things to completely change. Devices will be much cheaper and lighter, and the computing power will be in the edge cloud. That means that this, for example, which is a vision of AR glasses, you won't need to buy an expensive proprietary device just for AR. You might have AR as a software layer on the glasses that you're wearing anyway, for example, because things will just be much lighter, much more accessible, much cheaper. AR shopping is going to become a critical part of the 5G experience. When you're a retailer, 5G is just going to make it easier and easier and easier for things to be bought online. So retailers are going to have to respond by thinking of themselves just as much as entertainment brands as they are physical retail brands. Because you're going to have to draw people into your stores with experiences. And a lot of those experiences are going to be things like really immersive AR shopping experiences that you can't equate online, or even VR. You're going to see more and more immersive consumer experiences in retailers, or at least at the retailers who get it, that are willing to make the changes for the new world. And then lastly, I read inflection point here because I think about, when will 5G matter? And I get that question a lot when I go out and I talk about 5G. When will it matter? And it's an interesting thing. I think that 5G will kind of play in the background for a long time. Like, people will start getting 5G devices, but they won't notice that much different in the world. And then it will all change in one moment. There will be an inflection point. And I can't know for sure what the inflection point will be. Like, it's either going to be a new device, there'll be some new like $50 device that everybody has to have and everybody gets, and that'll be the inflection point. It might be something to do with scale. Maybe it's when there are 50 million 5G phones in use, all of a sudden 5G matters. I personally think it will be neither of those. I think it will be an experience. It'll be an app, it'll be a game, it'll be some sort of an immersive experience that gets invented. Remember Pokemon Go? Pokemon Go is a perfect kind of example because it blended the physical with the digital, and it also really hit the zeitgeist all in one moment and went from 0 to infinity instantaneously. I think it'll be something like that, where all of a sudden when that takes place, if you're a marketer, if you're a retailer, and you haven't already done all of this back work to make sure that you're ready for 5G, it'll already be too late. And so now that you've heard the background about 5G, let's go back to our 5 shifts. And I want to review them and you'll see what you've learned. So the first one is carrier power. What have we learned about carriers? We learned that there will be more and better data flowing through their pipes, and that we'll all have to figure out a way to tap into carrier data. Number 2, we didn't even mention this that much, but another thing the carrier will do is it will be your ISP, because 5G is not just about cellular phones. It's also a replacement for cable modem. So many of us, Verizon is already selling 5G as a replacement for your cable modem, for your home internet. So even your home internet will run through the cellular network. And then lastly, today people have 3, 4 devices, and we can probabilistically get reasonably close to linking them to the same person. When users have 30 devices, because there's sensors everywhere, probabilistic becomes impossible. The only company with any hope of linking devices to the same person is the carrier. So it's just another reason why carriers are going to play a critical role in this. The second trend, deterministic to AI. There'll be way better and more data inputs. The better the inputs, the better the models. That means that AI will be comparatively better than deterministic. In 3 years, we will no longer think of deterministic as definitely better than probabilistic. Number 2, the need for speed. Deterministic can't keep up. We've got to have real-time decisioning engines. And lastly, I also want to point out ephemeral versus periodic AI. It's my own terminology, but my point is today, AI, when we hear AI, it's really like a periodic AI. It's the kind of thing where you gather data for a while, you figure out what trends you find, and then you make a change. In the future, AI is going to have to be more ephemeral. It's going to have to be more truly real-time. Just taking stock of the data that's available from these sensors and all the devices out there at any given moment and making the best of it at that moment. It's not about hanging out in the background. So most AI today is an every once in a while AI. AI in the future is going to have to be every time AI, embedded in the edge cloud, making responses immediately. So my recommendation is to really think about who you work with, how your ads run. Are the companies that you work with truly getting the change that's coming with 5G? And are they willing to make the changes required to be relevant in the future? The third one is consumer tolerance. When consumers have these real-time immersive experiences in the future, they're not going to put up with bad experiences. And the ad infrastructure of today does not allow ads to respond fast enough to keep up with the kind of experiences that are coming in the future. So 5G is not going to magically fix that problem. It's going to make it way worse because it's going to make it way more visible and obvious than it is today. The 3 seconds it takes for a page to load has become a crutch in this industry. We've got to get through that. And remember the edge cloud, the concept of edge cloud. That's what the infrastructure looks like in the future. The fourth one, the role of the retail. retailer. First of all, indoor antennas. With 5G, for the best 5G experiences, retailers are going to have to embed their own infrastructure in their stores. Think of this as the new beacons. Remember 5 years ago, beacons was the future of retail? Beacons never panned out because it requires people to have Bluetooth on, because it's a proprietary technology, it's very expensive to put out. This is what beacons was always meant to be, is these small indoor 5G antennas. And also remember that the retailers are going to have to start thinking about themselves as much as an entertainment brand as they are a retail brand. Because that's how it's going to have to compete to get feet in the door, is to compete for people's entertainment and experiences that they're searching for. And the last one is market pressure. This has to do with, there's going to be that inflection point moment where all of a sudden 5G is the standard. And if you haven't done everything you needed to do before that point, it's already too late. And there will be a tremendous shift in market pressure. Your clients, your bosses are going to be calling and saying, how come we're not doing so-and-so? And they may not be doing that today, but when that inflection point comes, it'll already be too late. So what I'll leave you with is, first of all, think about what that inflection point will be. I can't know. I think it'll be a game of some kind, but it could be a device, could be the scale. And then lastly, what are you doing today to put yourself in a position that when that inflection point happens, you're ready. You've already done the work necessary to keep up with what consumers expect at that time. And that's all. Thank you so much for your time.